Now that I have my drawing onto my watercolor paper, I can begin the painting process. And I've added some details here, so we're going to kind of follow this format of just a one color in the background and these kind of rough edges. And do the same with the branch and the moon. So right behind his head I've added a moon, and I just use a washi tape roll to create my moon. And then the branches, so they are wider at their base, and as they come out they get smaller and smaller. And I've just created some branches over here on his left hand side. So of course you can design your branches however you would like. And the background, like I said, we're just going to do one color. I'm using the indigo from the Decadent Pies collection from Prima. So absolutely choose whatever blue you would like. The blue that I am using is an exploding color, which will kind of add to this kind of flowy, freeform background that we're having. So, easy enough to do this background, one of the most simple backgrounds that you can do. All you're going to do is make sure your brush is rinsed out really well. Take some clean water and work in this section by section. So each one of these little sections within my branches, I'm going to paint each one separate. And I'm just starting with this larger section down here. I'm going to fill it in with water, and since my edges are going to be jagged like this one, so you really, when you're applying your water, if you just kind of go back and forth, you don't want to make like a solid line here. Just create kind of that jagged look. And with this, I will apply just a tad more water than I typically do when I'm painting backgrounds, because I do want this to be really flowy and freeform. And I also do not worry about coming all the way to my pencil lines. I apply this water, and then when I apply a load of paint, I'll come back with a smaller brush and cut into those spaces right next to my lines. So now I'm going to get my paint ready and get this really wet so that it will flow into my water. I have a fully loaded brush, and for this part you just pick where you want it to go, plop it in, and let it flow. So you can see, like I said, with this exploding color, it just kind of goes where it wants to go. And I like to come back over the areas where I've dropped and make some of them a little more intense. That'll help when we add the stars so that they kind of shine through. So, and you don't want to cover the whole space, so you want some areas left where there's not a lot of color. And remember that this is going to move as it dries as well. So once I've laid in the water and the color, then I come back with a smaller brush and cut into my pencil lines. Much easier to do with a smaller brush. And for this, I'll use a little water, a little paint, just whatever I think is necessary to make it look cohesive. So once I have all my lines in, I'm going to come back in and add a few more dark places so my stars can really have some of the limelight too. But also remember to make sure to leave some areas where there's not a lot of color, because you really want it to be free flowing. So while the area is still wet, it's not quite dry yet, I can also come in with salt in just a few areas. I don't want to overdo it, but that will create these little starburst bloom effects as the salt soaks up the water in the paint. It'll leave behind some really magical little things as it dries. So I'll go throughout this whole process all around my bird, and when you're coming to these smaller sections, you want to adjust your brush size accordingly. So for this area I used a bit of a bigger brush. I've got a bigger area. But as I come to these smaller areas, of course, I'll use a smaller brush. I've got all these areas filled in, all these small areas around my brush or around my branches. So now I'm going to start this larger area here where I don't really have any branches. So I'm going to have to do this whole area kind of at one time. So I just wanted to show you how I break it down. So I start off the same. I'm going to wet about the same area as this. So putting in my water first, and I'll bring the water content out to about the top of the moon. Okay, so got my water in. Now I'm going to apply the paint. And then use my smaller brush to move this paint around a bit and cut into where my pencil lines are. Adding a few more sections where it's more intense. So once I have the water line, or once I have the water all the way up to my lines, then I can really come in and start to add some more definition with a little more paint. So it'll go right up to that line. Just a few more hints of paint, and then while this is still wet, I can start the same process over here. So going to go back to my bigger brush and pull this water content down to another manageable size here. So I think I can probably get this whole side. So you have to work kind of quickly when you're doing these bigger sections, but if you put enough water to begin with, you should have a manageable amount of time to work with your paint. And I'm kind of trying to, keep it, looking at the overall shape of it, so to keep my jagged edges kind of similar on both sides. So same thing, I'm dropping in the paint here, and I'll finish up with my smaller brush.